know how I got these scars.
Heath Ledger's Joker asks this question twice in A Dark Knight, and each time, the answer changes. His angry drunk father, his wife's rejection. But what's real here? For Freud, trauma isn't a single event. It's a wound that haunts us, replayed and reshaped in the mind. Today, we're unpacking the Joker's scar tales through this lens, exploring the ambiguous relationship between fantasy and reality. The Joker describes what seems to be a childhood trauma, a drunk growling "why so serious" before cutting his face. Later, with Rachel Dawes, it's a different scene, a wife, scarred by loan sharks, who he mimics by cutting himself, only for her to abandon him. Both tales are raw, but they don't align. For Freud, trauma isn't lived once, it's relived compulsively, as the mind tries to master what it couldn't process. Children overhear at an early age and understand only subsequently. The Joker's scar stories feel like a mixture of things experienced directly, overheard, or imagined. Fragmented scenes, replayed with new details each time. A series of traumatic scenes that were probably first experienced as a child, and have condensed with other traumatic scenes as he got older, forcing himself to relive the different sequences over and over, so he can work through the trauma, create meaning from it. These repetitions aren't literal memories, they're constructions laced with fantasy. The father tale becomes an Oedipal violence, a patriarch wounding his son. We retroactively interpret and create meaning from events that were confusing in the past, especially as a child. Neither is true in a factual sense. They're a psychic staging of a wound that gains meaning only later, through retelling. Why the shift in stories? For Freud, fantasy isn't just an escape, it's a shield. In Freud and the Scenes of Trauma, John Fletcher explores how trauma survivors create elaborate narratives to mask the real, unbearable core of their pain. The Joker has created protective measures, a defense against certain memories. Here, fantasy emerges from an unconscious process of decomposing and recombining, with the original order lost. In this sense, the father's story with him as a victim is just as true as the wife's story, which paints him as a tragic anti-hero. Ultimately, what's at stake here is not what happened in reality, but how he has created meaning for himself from these events. It becomes both a defense mechanism and a strategy. The Joker wields these fantasies like weapons. With Gamble, the father tale amplifies his menace, a backstory to scare a mobster before the kill. With Rachel, the wife's story shows vulnerability, reeling her in before he snaps the trap shut. Fletcher might argue this is trauma turned performative. The Joker doesn't just relive his wound, this staging. He forces others into this world as well. Fantasy here isn't a retreat from reality. It can distort reality. Repression works to defend against true trauma emerging and creates in its place a fantasy that lets him dominate it. Compare this to Batman, whose trauma, his parents' murder, is a fixed, obsessive memory which drives his mission. Joker has condensed his reality. Fletcher takes on trauma as a scene, a stage reenactment. The Joker doesn't need one origin. He's a kaleidoscope of origins, each a fantasy that keeps the real wound repressed. This has answered our main question: what's real? As we have seen, through a Freudian lens, we have been asking the wrong thing. Trauma isn't about historical fact. It's about psychic truth, a reality fractured by what the mind can't hold. The Joker's scars are a literal mark, but their stories, fantasies, and memories are so inextricably linked that they blur the lines between reality and fantasy. This was the basis of Freud's theory of the Oedipal complex. Maybe the father existed, maybe the wife did, or maybe neither, and the scars came from something mundane that his psyche rejects. Fletcher draws on Freud's idea that trauma returns as a missed encounter, something never fully grasped, endlessly replayed. The scar stories are that encounter, circling a void we never see. Are they lies? Fantasies bleeding into memories? Or memories warped by fantasy? The Dark Knight thrives on this uncertainty, and Joker's tales amplify that tension. For Freud, this blur is trauma's essence. It resists closure, leaving us and the Joker trapped in a loop of repetition and revision. He asks, "Want to know how I got these scars?" Not to answer, but to pull us into the question. Joker's scars don't have one story because trauma, as Freud showed us, doesn't work that way. In The Dark Knight, his tales, father, wife, whatever's next, are fragments of a shattered psyche, where fantasy and reality twist into something ambiguous, something alive. He's not explaining himself, he's reenacting himself, perhaps trying to understand past memories by retelling them in different combinations, and we're caught in the scene. What do you think? Does the Joker know the truth, or is the truth irrelevant? Let me know in the comments, and if this Freudian dive into chaos clicked for you, hit subscribe. Next time, I'll unravel another mind. Until then, smile.